Call this meeting of the Advisory Finance Committee to order. This is meeting number 23 of fiscal year 22. The date is February 10th, 2022. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, meetings conducted by hybrid means will be conducted in person or via remote access in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body may access this meeting in person or via remote means by using the link indicated below. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by accessing the meeting by in-person attendance. Additionally, meetings are broadcast in real time via Westboro TV, Verizon Channel 28, or Charter Channel 192, or on www.youtube.com/WestboroTV. First order of business is the minutes of the meeting of February 7th. Do I have a motion to accept?
I move to accept the minutes of February 7th, meeting number 21.
Right. Second?
Owen, second.
Bradley, second.
Okay.
Good.
Any discussion? All in favor?
We have to do a roll.
We'll have to do a roll call. I know.
Lambert,
Okay.
abstain.
Tom,
Bradley,
you're...
yes.
Bradley, yes. Tom?
Owen, yes.
Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Moretti, yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 501.
Okay, we have a guest this evening, Mr. Edward Bain, Chair of the Westboro Affordable Housing Trust, and he is going to take us through Articles 17 and 18 on the current version of the warrant, which is version 7. Mr. Bain, whenever you're ready.
Okay, Ed Bain, 5 Thomas Rice Drive, Westboro. First of all, thank you for having us here this evening. I'm also joined in person by Alan Edinburgh, who's on the committee. He is Secretary of the Westboro Affordable Housing Trust. And we're going to talk this evening about 2 articles, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, on, for the town meeting on Affordable Housing Trust money. So let me, okay. Now, I assume everybody can see what's being displayed there that are on
Yeah, I'm
the
getting-
video.
Yes, they can. I'm seeing.
Okay, I'm
They're
seeing-
nodding.
seeing
Nodding
nods.
in it.
Okay,
It's-
great.
it's-
Technology is working. First of all, I just want to do a little background about the Affordable Housing Trust. You've heard before, it was established a year ago, last November, at the Fall Town Meeting, where we voted to adopt a part of the state law that allows the town to create a trust. And trusts have certain abilities, obligations, controls, et cetera, to enable the, creation, preservation, et cetera, of affordable housing within the town. And up there, I'm not going to go through everything here, but you can see what our mission is and some of the key guiding principles. One of the things we want to do is really keep an eye on 40B, make sure we stay above that. We are currently at 13.2%, which is very good. Higher than most towns, you would see, but we need to continue our work with that. There's also, as you all well know, the price of housing has just gone crazy, and that's not only on home ownership, but also on rentals. Here is the trustees. Some names you'll recognize. Nancy Armitage is somewhat new. She's a trustee. She's actually an attorney. Her background is from BU and then NYU Law, and kind of a neighbor of mine, but she's just great. So we have her. We have this guy, Ed Bain. I was elected chair. Alan, obviously, from the board, who brings just tremendous knowledge about the ins and outs of affordable housing within the Commonwealth, both from a law standpoint, contacts, and various mechanisms we can use, with the trust in order to accomplish our mission. Leah McLean, she's a broker. She's also a member of the CPA committee, exploratory committee. Hank Roush, you may have heard of him. He's our vice chair, and Hank has a background, if you're not aware of it, is of Habitat for Humanity. So he brings a unique perspective of having developed low-income housing over many, many years. And then Kate Storm is another member. She's in social work, so she brings in a good view of the real needs of people. Really, she keeps us on track that way. All right, some of the trust activity that we've been involved in the past year, and this is not by any means, we did, and we'll look at it in a second, goals and objectives, gave us a timeline, allowed us to plan out the next 5+ years. We were able, because of COVID, we saw a specific need to provide rental assistance to people within town. If they met certain criteria, we engaged a company called Metro West Collaborative to basically run that program. So people, submitted applications, et cetera, and then we could help them with monthly, like up to 6 months, and then we extended it even up to 9 months. And we wound up helping, as it says, 16 families over 12 months. And that took about $90,000, but it really made an impact on, I think it was about 50 people in total, 16 families, about 50 people. We've been working with Westboro Housing Authority. We're looking to do a couple of things. One is we're working with Senator Jamie Eldridge to try to get some money earmarked to bring the existing Rogers Road properties, affordable properties there, up to code a bit more, get sprinklers in there, possibly provide elevators so that if somebody needs to be brought down from the second floor, the current egress is not the best. So we're seeing if we can get some money so it doesn't hit either the trust or taxpayers to bring them up to date. We're also looking at longer-term development of some housing, and we'll talk about that in a minute, in that property, in that footprint in Rogers Road, back by the senior center, that area. We've looked at a couple of individual things. We have 3 Baylor Road. It was a tax taking, and we have specifically an article asking that the town sell that property. Basically, we would pay the outstanding taxes. It would come over to the trust. The trust would then either renovate or replace, depending upon the condition. It has some asbestos and things like that. It's a small property, but it would be a perfect starter home for a family. What else? And we looked at a few other properties that just didn't pan out. We reached out to the owners, but they weren't interested. And we really developed a number of policies just to ensure that our operations and fiscal management are appropriate. And we work closely with the finance director doing that as well as with the Board of Selectmen. And we've established a very good working relationship with a nonprofit called the Massachusetts Housing Partnership that basically is a good conduit. There's one person that's been assigned to us to reach out to other state agencies as we might need funds or guidance or consulting, et cetera. So here are our strategic goals. I'm not going to walk through these, but you can see that we've identified, approximately 12 or so key points, everything from build capacity, create some opportunities, and then initiate some specific programs. And you can see along the top, there's different years. So we go out actually to FY26, so that actually goes into calendar year 27 and even beyond. And we have these 3 arrows here are showing the things that we're going to talk about tonight for funding. This first one, which I mentioned, is the Baylor Avenue. Basically, we're just looking to have the town approve the transfer or to authorize the selectmen to sell the property to the trust at about $50K or $48,000, which is what the outstanding tax lien was. So the town has then kept they get all their money back that they had lost through the non-payment of taxes. And as I mentioned, we'll either renovate or replace that project, depending upon, as we get further into depth on that. And we would hope to have that completed by, if everything goes well, the beginning of calendar year 2023. So, Q1, Q2, 2023. So, a year out maybe. These are some of the numbers. What we believe is the acquisition, which is that payment of taxes, would be $50K. A renovation would be $150, whether it's a rebuild, knockdown, gut, addition, whatever it may be. There's some personal property, including a truck that was abandoned there. The owner has passed away, so that's the reason that it's an abandoned property. And then we would look to sell it at affordable market rates, which would be about 40% of the market rate. We estimate if we had a nice house at that property that it would normally sell, and this is based upon comparables of that area, for about $400,000. So if we take 40% of that, it comes out to $170,000. So basically, if you take how much we spend, what our revenues we would get back, we'd be out, not out, but it's just part of the investment we make, about $25K from the trust. Okay. The next area is really an initiative that we'd like to take up on the Rogers Road area, which is to build about a 40-unit affordable housing building that would, apartments, rental apartments, small, probably like one bedroom, particularly for seniors, that we would help facilitate some of the financing as well as throw in some of our own money. And you can see there some of the ways we can do things is doing interest-free loans to developers so that they don't have to take money out of their pocket day one before they, because the shorter the time between the time they put a shovel in the ground and they start selling or renting, in these cases, the property, the better it is for them. So what we'd look to do is do a pre-permit financing. We would subsidize 1.2 million of it. Now, the building itself would probably be about at least 4 to 5 times that amount. Alan, I don't know if you have any better idea of that, but it would be a portion of that. We would get a nonprofit developer who would be looking to develop, but we would kick in some earnest money as well. Some legal and accounting, et cetera. When we're done, it would cost us, the trust, about 1.2 million, as you can see on the bottom line there under expenditures. But we could create 40 units of affordable housing specifically for the people that most need it in many ways in town. Another program that the state sponsors is what they call a first-time home buyers pilot, and there's this program called One Mortgage. And it's designed for people who are, it's the first time they're buying their house. Like a Baylor Avenue would be a perfect example if that was all brought, up to snuff, if you will. It would be a perfect starter home for somebody. But they have down payments as low as 3% for people that, you don't have to be rich. I mean, this is, once again, you're still have to be considered within a certain percentage of the area median income. You've got to be below that by a certain percentage in order to be eligible to participate in this. But you would pay like 3% down, and interest rates could be very, very low, like a few percent. Once again, like about 3%. And as we see rates going up, we would hope that that would continue to be in that area. So basically, we need to put in some money to facilitate this, as well as we would get some from the state. And it would net out, when all is said and done, about $165,000. Now, this doesn't require any, there isn't a specific article for this, but it's part of the 1.2 million request in the second article. this is, all this money comes out. So here's the summary of those projects I just went through. And we currently have a balance of $642,000 in the trust. When we do the things that we're looking to do and have done, or the 642 is what we started with. That was what was transferred from the Stabilization Fund last November, or a year ago November, into the trust. That's how we have used and are looking to use monies. The biggest request is that $1.285 million. And we would be then still have a balance of $413,000 in the trust. You can see that we're requesting the amount from the Stabilization Fund of the Del Webb. We had to set that up. Basically, money from the Del Webb mitigation money comes into a stabilization fund, and then the town can move money from that stabilization fund into the trust. It's just that double hop. So as that money has come in, and basically they've finished buildings 2 and 3 now up at Lake Chauncey out of the 14 that they're going to build in the end. That's their plan. That's basically the money, the 1.285 is what is in the stabilization fund now. Just a couple of other points. Our affordable housing trust, there are town bylaws, policy guide laws, et cetera, and all financial transactions are done through the town finance director. In other words, we sign off on them, but they have to do the stamp, they cut the checks, et cetera. So in summary, we are doing things that are in support of the goal and mission. We're requesting this $1.285 million from the Stabilization Fund, particularly to help develop some of these larger projects. And this will have no effect upon taxes or cash, free cash, anything, since it's a transfer from that Stabilization Fund that Del Webb has been funding. With that. And I think that's it. So,
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
questions?
Yep. Any
Anything you want
questions?
to add, Alan?
Hang on.
Yeah. Do you have a question, Alan?
No,
Oh, sorry.
He's coming up
in
to,
case you have questions, I forgot to answer.
So
Walter.
my first question is, can you refresh us on that stabilization fund had certain things it was supposed to be spent on, I think seniors, affordable housing or something, or is it wide open what that's allowed to be spent on?
So the Del Webb Stabilization Fund is a series of 14 payments totaling $9 million as part of a zoning variance agreement with Pulte, the town, and the zoning board, authorized and voted on by the Zoning Board of Appeals, that is designated for affordable housing and other projects for senior citizens.
Okay. Thank you. So this sounds like this fits.
This fits within the use, and the trust doesn't expect doesn't expect all the money in that fund to come to affordable housing. There will be other projects over the years, but we have some opportunities to make some quick progress towards our goals and mitigate the need for affordable housing, particularly for the 62+ community.
Paul?
I have, I think, 3 questions. One is kind of a follow-up on that, and that is, you're not advocating money for other purposes, but what are the alternatives for that fund, for those funds? I mean, this is the perfect one, it seems like, but there might be others. Are there any that have been theorized, or?
from the trust side?
Yeah, from that Del Webb mitigation money.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's anytime we find an opportunity that either to preserve, if you will, i.e. take a piece of property that might need some fixing up, to preserve it, or to do a buyout, maybe from an existing owner, along with some money from the state, we could use it for things like that.
Well, I guess when Alan said that we don't, expect all the money to go to the trust
Oh,
from that
okay.
mitigation funds, where else might it go? I'm just trying to get the big picture.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it. Sorry, Paul.
That's really to be determined. There have been no specific
Yeah.
senior-related projects identified. But knowing that the town is, there's a warrant article to do a study on services to senior citizens, we expect that there will be projects identified, and there will be a desire to use some of those funds for those projects as well. And sort of our use of the funds, our planned use of the funds fits our guiding principles, which is we don't want to be a government entity building housing, because that is fiscally inefficient, where we can provide low interest or no interest financing, where we can provide partial subsidies in addition to subsidies that would come from the state or the federal government to make projects viable. We can leverage. You can't build a one-bedroom apartment for $30,000. But if we can, and we picked that number because there have been a number of successful conversion projects that have used that level of subsidy here in Massachusetts. If we can leverage a little bit of money to help a big project happen, then we get the most value out of the dollars.
Okay, I guess that leads to my second question, but I thought the efficient trend was away from big developments, but I guess really it was away from fully subsidized big developments. Is that right?
Well, it's a way that, you're right, but it's more, specifically, the state does not want to own, or they don't want necessarily municipalities to own housing projects. Now, they're taking a view, a lot like, what you would see in Boston or some maybe other large cities, but it goes across the board. So if we were to develop something, the trust does not want to run anything. We want to help develop, preserve affordable housing, but then have somebody else run it, a land management company or a apartment management company that would then collect the rents, do the maintenance, et cetera. It would be set up probably as a separate LLC or whatever it would need to be.
Okay, great, thanks. I have a third question, Mike. Do you want me to go ahead, or do you want me to?
No, please, go ahead.
It's on the Baylor Avenue. I think, according to Zillow at least, the assessed value of that is, I think it was $267K, $5,000 worth of taxes, which I get, I realize we haven't been getting, the town hasn't been getting. And then it looks like that would be, as opposed to after it's all developed, the taxes that we'd get from it would be at the affordable housing value. So would that be say the $170,000 value, the taxes, that would go against the property of that value?
Right. Obviously, it's up to whatever the assessment is done.
Right.
But
I've done the math on the model we have. Again, doing the comparisons, we expect without a garage, without a solarized roof, that property would, in today's market, go for about $400,000. There have been some recent transactions on nearly identical layouts in that neighborhood. Affordable housing, typically DHCD prices at 40% of market, which would put it, that's where we came up with the 170 number. That $230,000 difference as far as ongoing tax revenue to the town, in our current proposed fiscal year 23 budget would, for the average household, represent 54 cents in
lost.
In lost tax revenue.
If it was sold at market.
If it was sold at market, that's the difference.
So it would go, if all things being equal, it would go from the 5K now to, let's say, 2,000 or something, 40%, right?
Well, the 170 times whatever our $18
Yeah, that range, okay.
plus.
So that is what, that's what's
You're
lost.
absolutely right. You're absolutely
But
right.
you're putting it in terms of per person, per household. Thank you.
Right.
It would be about $3,100 in taxes to the town of that property.
Yeah, I just want to get that all out on the table.
Right. Basically, any of the affordable housing currently in town is assessed at the affordable housing rate. So this isn't something that's new, but you're absolutely right as far as doing the numbers. We would be, basically in order to increase our what they call subsidized housing inventory, SHI, we're leaving a couple bucks on the table.
And not to get into all the detail, but if whoever moves into it eventually sells it, they also need to keep it at those, it needs to stay at that
Right.
level.
There's a deed, but basically in the land court, when the deed is transferred over, there's a rider on the deed which says this has to be sold at the affordable market rate. Now, that still means that it can go up in value just because of inflation, et cetera, but you can't make a windfall on it.
Right.
You can't go out and sell it for $400,000 the next day.
Right, and the taxes will stay in
Right,
in
exactly.
proportion to that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just for the record, that house can be auctioned if the town so chooses.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so
So-
town meeting has a choice.
Yeah, so
Okay.
if this article does not pass, the custodian of the property, who's our treasurer collector, would put the house up for auction. Given what we know about the condition of the house, we don't, and where the market is and the potential cost of renovation, we think, my estimate would be that at auction, it probably wouldn't go for more than 100 or 125,000, just because whoever's gonna renovate and flip it is gonna want, some profit.
I mean, we're looking at 150,000 just to bring it up to,
And they would owe the taxes too.
And
The person that buys it at
Well,
auction, no?
when you buy it at auction, 100% of the proceeds come to the town.
Okay, so,
So yes, so the town could get, 100,000 hypothetically for the property instead of the 48. In the vast majority of cases, when towns transfer properties to affordable housing trusts, it's generally seen as part of the town's contribution to do so at no cost. We're comfortable and offered, when we approach the town, to start this process to cover the tax lien liability, recognizing that has been a burden on the taxpayers. And we feel the economics of this project, doing that doesn't hurt it or make it infeasible for the trust to do.
and it once again, keeps or puts, actually, it puts on the inventory, on the affordable housing inventory, another property. So the town, is the town possibly giving up something? Yes. But what does it gain? And it's, first of all, I can talk from an ethical viewpoint, which is why I'm involved in this, is that we have an obligation to try to provide affordable housing to those in need, especially given the horrendous, prices that we're seeing in both home ownership and rental prices. As well as then it also helps us with our 40B a little bit. Every little bit helps.
and if you were then to say, oh, I can bring more money in for affordable housing by selling it, but then you got to spend more money somehow to create an affordable house. So if you want to do the affordable housing, you're not likely to you don't gain really much by that schema.
And based on community input, while we were exploring creating the trust, one of our guiding principles is to look at and prioritize conversions of existing housing stock where feasible, because we're not, in the long term, we're not increasing the size of the community.
Yeah.
Right? And so whether the house sells at market or whether it sells as affordable, someone will be living in that house, as opposed to, any new construction where you're adding residents and you're increasing, demand on a per property basis, if you will,
Right.
for our town services.
Right. Yeah.
Andrew?
Thank you. Two quick questions. Well, the first one's quick. Do you happen to know the addition of the 40 units coming on the market? Do you know what that does to our percentage of affordable housing?
It would, off the top of my head, I don't have it, but it would keep us at least, we're at, as I mentioned, 13.2%. Let me answer that a little differently, Andrew, for a minute. If once Pulte is done, all right, Pulte is being built, it's not, no affordable. That's why they're paying us this mitigation money, because of, we won't get into the details of how that all came to be. But they don't have any affordable units. So they're building 700 units in the end, the 14 buildings, 50 units each, okay? So you can see that many units coming into town that are not affordable. So that increases our total residential units, okay, which then drives down. And my understanding was if they're fully built out, we'd come down to just over 10%, about
11.2.
11.2. I was going to say 10.2, 11.2 per the town planner. So by doing these 40, it would help us keep that up there. Maybe, I don't know, we might get up to 12 or something with that. The other concern is also at times there are housing. It's not a huge amount, but it's large enough to be concerned about that can sometimes come off of affordable housing. There may be a small development where after 30 years, financing is paid off and it reverts back to market rate. The developer has the right to do that. But, so we're constantly keeping our eye on 40B.
Yes, we are. And
So,
we're nervous because part of it is the numbers we're working off are still based on the 2010 census.
yeah.
Because the housing numbers for the 2020 census are late, they haven't been published yet. And so it's, not, in theory, we have a sense of where we are based on the amount of construction that happened over the course of the decade. But to Ed's point, there are, we're fortunate that the vast majority of our affordable housing, particularly rental units, are in perpetuity. There are still a few developments that have terms coming to an end. In fact, we've got an apartment complex that DHCD had told us originally was coming off in 2025. It's actually coming off in 2022. And the way it was permitted originally, all 120 units count towards SHI. There are actually 24 affordable units in the complex that are coming off. And so the town and the trust and others are working with the owners of that development to see if we can find an ongoing program to keep those units affordable. But those 24 families in that affordable housing have already received notice that if they can't afford market rates starting October, they're out. And so we're actually involved in a bit of a mad scramble to prevent that from happening. So there are threats and ebbs and flows. So,
Yeah, well, just the fact that you're ballparking about a 0.5% impact here, más o menos, with all these other things going, that's meaningful. I think that's powerful. The other question I had, though, was looking at 40 units and throwing those up. Does that really happen in the course of a year? And I ask that because I imagine the money is sitting, in a nice account accumulating whatever savings rate it is. Whereas if we pull all of the money out right now to pay for the 1.2 million, I'm looking at the 40 units. Are we pulling all of that money out prematurely when this could be done in an installment style?
No, I mean, basically the money would be allocated to the trust. Now, trust funds are managed by the finance team, which means they're invested and are earning interest. I don't know the amount. They usually are fairly conservative in their investments. So it's not as if we move it out from stabilization into a trust that we would lose interest on it.
And some of the mechanics go in. If we want to use, our plan is to use some of that money for zero or low interest pre-permit financing, because that can, right now on a project this size, pre-permit financing, to do the work to get to the point where you can get your permit and start construction, those interest rates are still in the 7.5% to 9.5% range. So if we can save a developer, a nonprofit developer, interest, it lowers the overall cost of the project, it lowers the amount of subsidy that's required to get the project to hit the financial benchmarks that the state steps in and gives their money, et cetera.
So it
Once the project's defined, the trust needs the capital in place. Because you can't sign an agreement with a developer that says you're getting this subsidy at these milestones if there's a chance that at some point in the future there would be a no vote to fund the trust to provide those payments. So the money sort of has to be there upfront. And the trust needs the assets. Now that said, given the scope of what we're doing and the restrictions on the trust for oversight purposes, these projects at this point would all come before the select board at least for a vote of concurrence before we could move forward. And depending on the timing, we might hit the 80% threshold that would have a vote at town meeting in October to move forward with the project, so.
Yeah, we have, if you will, tripwires, if that's a good term, both through the Board of Selectmen and town meeting, huh? That's a bad term. They're a bad term. We have
Safety nets.
safety nets and governors that will ensure that, we get some money, we just don't go out and spend it wildly. It's got to go through a process and higher the amounts, more, if you will, strict, and the higher oversight that there need be for those projects.
Thank you very much for helping understand why I think that whole pull is right now. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Andrew.
Paul, your hand is up?
Yes, I just thought of it, it's sort of the flip side of the question I had on the single-family home. Because it's a nonprofit developer for the large development, does that mean there are no real estate taxes eventually?
No, if when you say like the Baylor Avenue property, if that's brought back online and is sold,
No, there would be property taxes.
It's talking about because the developer is a nonprofit corporation, do they not pay property taxes?
while they're doing the work? you
No,
mean?
when they own it, or are they selling those 40 units?
So in most projects, the nonprofit that does the construction work is not the property owner. And there are mechanisms, and one of the aspects of the project we're actively working on in the exploratory phase we are right now is it better to land lease? Is it, is it appropriate to sell? And, what role what role does the housing authority want in the, potential future management of the property? There's some strategic advantage to increasing the census of properties under the control of the housing authority, just given sort of state policy with respect to minimum viable housing authority size and how much support they provide. And so, all of that will be fleshed out. We've got great consultation from the Mass Housing Partnership. The team over at CHAPA, which is an nonprofit advocacy group, also has expertise that they can assist us with this as we work through the process.
But does it depend then on those, whether the town will get taxes from this development, or will there definitely be taxes, and will they get the full rate, or is it some kind of a negotiated thing?
Well, once the property is sold to a homeowner.
If it's sold. Currently, there are no taxes on the property because it's owned by a government entity.
Right.
I thought it was rentals, though. Are these individual, are they condos in the big development?
This would be rental units.
Rental.
Are you talking
Right.
about the 40-unit development?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yes, those would be,
currently, that property, and if that is owned by the housing authority, which as a municipal entity, there isn't property taxes paid. So depending on, the end result, we could end up with a development that would generate property taxes or not. We're not sure exactly where it goes, and the real challenge is matching the project to the currently available funding sources and priorities to get the balance sheet to work successfully so that everyone who needs to signs off and it can move forward.
Okay, thanks. I was thinking it might be a sort of a windfall on the flip side, since the people that, the seniors may, not, at least, you know, they won't be going to school, have family
No.
homes.
I mean,
But it
and-
sounds like that's an unknown.
It's an unknown, it's a possibility. We'll see where it goes. You know, one of the challenges of that is if that property is paying property taxes, then a portion of the rent, you know, that you know, we're subsidizing is actually being used for the property taxes, and that, you know, squeezes the finance of the operation of the project long-term. And so there's a broad range of considerations, so we'll.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions. If the town meeting votes this 1.25 million for that particular project, is that money going to be preserved for use for that project only? Or will the trust have the ability to use it as it sees fit for other projects that might come up in the time between approval and shovel in the ground?
So if the money's transferred, the trust is making a commitment to hold it for the use on this project, which begs the question, well, what if, you know, there's a feasibility study that we're waiting to be done that MHP has been gracious enough to fund. If the feasibility study comes back and says, no, you really don't want to build on this land at all, then we would, the money's in the trust, we would hold it, and we would look for other comparable projects.
Now, I understand just from offline discussions that one of the limits in getting started on this property, if the money is approved, is the capacity of the sewer
Correct.
system.
Yes. We have many conversations about sewer and wastewater
Yes.
capacity.
Could you kind of walk us through that?
Yes, so,
I'll start and you can
Okay.
finish, okay? Basically, right now, within the town, there are allocations for sewer usage, you know, flow rates. And they're broken up into individual residential, multifamily residential, commercial, and industrial. They were, at some point in the past, I don't know exactly when, each of those groupings was allocated a certain amount of flow rate into the treatment plant. At this stage, because of the significant amount of development we've seen in multifamily housing, particularly, you know, you look at all the apartments and condos, you know, that's where it's come from, not residential developments. We're out of capacity, we're out of allocation, and I want to watch my words, not necessarily capacity, but allocation for multifamily homes, multifamily residential units. Up on Mount Pleasant Street, they recently built, I don't know, a couple dozen houses up there, and what they had to do was put in a neighborhood septic system because they could not hook into the current sewer system. What they're doing now, we did vote on, I guess it was last November, to allocate a certain amount of money for an engineering consulting study of flow rates and allocation, which is eventually set by DEP, or has to be signed off by Department of Environmental Protection, to understand the capacity and maybe the reallocation of flow rates. We believe that there's more than sufficient flow rate capabilities, especially with the loss of Astra, which used a tremendous amount of water and therefore sewer, that there will be enough total capacity. It's just the allocation. Now, we're hoping that by first quarter next year, like a year from now, that study will be done and they'll be able to make recommendations as far as reallocation of so it won't be for a year until we know that, you know, we're good to go. But we have a high you know, confidence that that's gonna happen.
So it's at least a year before you stick a shovel in the ground, if probably more.
yeah, yes, we're probably looking 12 plus months before we put a shovel in the ground, but realistically, by the time the feasibility study is done, there's a whole process for financial pro formas, project concept, and then going out, you know, to bid on the project. If we were sitting there with our wastewater, permission slip in hand, we'd still probably be looking at 12 months.
Okay. Yeah, so you're going to be spending some money before we even find
Yeah,
out
so-
if we.
So
have
the
approval.
wastewater reallocation work was
Yeah.
a warrant article for the DPW. That's their domain. It's, they're handling it, they're managing it.
Okay,
But there will be some dollars spent, and that was in the budget line item. We have allocated some money for consultants and legal fees. Fortunately, right now, with funding at the state and through the quasi-government agencies and the nonprofits, there's actually many, many grants to help initiate affordable housing. And so things like feasibility study, architecture and design, assistance and development of project concepts and RFPs, all come into play, and we're building those relationships so that we know when and who and how to ask for the money.
okay.
As just as a side note, with some of the ARPA money that's coming into the state, not, to the municipalities, there's about 600 million going to housing. Of that, 115 million has been earmarked for affordable housing grants.
But we're not the only
No,
municipality.
But
Right.
what, I was talking with somebody from, there's another nonprofit called CDAC, and they're saying now's a good time to be asking, because, first of all, the state's doing pretty well, in its budget, and also with that, some of that ARPA money coming in. I'm not saying it's a shoo-in, but we were in better shape than we normally would be.
So you talked about potentially hiring a management company or engaging a management company or setting up a management company to manage this property, whatever you
Right.
decide, right? The Westboro Housing Authority, however, is going to have oversight of.
So again, this goes to how the project gets funded and built.
Okay,
So, and there are a couple of different paths. One can be where, and there's the state's most favorite way of developing affordable housing is to contract with a private nonprofit developer who will build and operate. And typically, the developers who build will then contract with a firm to do the management and operations. And because part of the finances of the project that go to that developer is based on some return from a portion of the rental income on the property, just as a regular commercial developer would look at a project. The housing authority, in that scenario, the housing authority would be a candidate to do the management. It's not a slam dunk. It's a distinct possibility. It happens in many, many communities. And if we head in that direction, that can be a preference stated in the RFP evaluation criteria.
do we have the current management capacity and skill set to manage an additional large project of this size, or is it going to require that WHA hire additional staff to do this?
More than likely,
I mean, we're looking a little farther down the
right,
road,
so,
but, but these are the unintended
well, yeah, so
consequences.
so
of
more
this
than
stuff.
likely, the WHA, out of the income it receives from running those
Yeah.
units, would need to increment its office staff and
Maintenance staff.
maintenance
Yeah.
staff, just
That
to cover
would-
the additional units.
Would that fall,
That falls to the housing authority.
okay,
in
so
their
not
balance
on the
sheet.
And the
taxpayer?
rent-
And there are DHCD programs and subsidies to help ramp that up and subsidize that as well.
Okay.
So,
But it would be covered by, the rents that are coming in, just like any apartment complex.
Okay. Paul? Paul?
Yeah, I'm trying to,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, I froze. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, along the same lines, I was thinking, as you guys are talking about how complicated this all is, but apart from the articles, is the trust gonna need staff at some point in order to accomplish, this sounds like you're really getting into a lot of details.
We're not looking to hire anybody. We can tap for finance, management, things like that, the town finance department. Now, if they want to cross-charge us for, if it starts to get, of significance, they may want to do that. Generally, we would look to hire outside consultants, people with specialized knowledge of development of affordable housing. So we would not have any staff. That's not our mission. That's not our.
And given the size of the project, it may be prudent for us to have an outside project manager,
Right.
That represents us. That could require funds, but there are also state grants, CHAPA, MHP, CDAC can provide those services. Additionally, there are regional housing offices that have staff that we can contract with or become a member of, that gives us access to day-to-day staff without hiring full-time equivalents and to meet the needs. And those regional housing offices work because some of the member towns will have projects going and some won't. And so you sort of have this ongoing expertise, and they serve whichever communities are active.
You basically have a pool
of
that
resources.
you can
So there are a number of options. We want to avoid staffing just because it creates overhead and it utilizes dollars in the trust. So we're conscious of
I'm
that and have a
thinking
path forward.
succession planning too, between you two and Hank and probably the other members. You're very committed, you're putting a lot of time into this. I'm wondering if that's sustainable as other people come on, but hopefully the model will continue.
Yes.
It's like any board or a commission, you're always gonna wanna bring in new blood and things like that. We're allocated, or we're allowed to have up to 7 members. We have 6 right now, as you saw in the beginning slide, so. You have spare time, Paul?
Well, we've got, Ed and I have sort of been with this.
You just froze again.
So Ed and I have been with this since, the beginning.
Hank.
As is Hank. Leah was part of, the working group, but, Kate Storm joined after the formation of the trust. Nancy Armitage, who's never worked in affordable housing, is joined and has, dove right in. There's an understanding among all the trustees that there's nothing short-term in affordable housing. And that particularly if we're going to undertake a large project, or a large project for us, one that, when we talk about 40 units with MHP, they're like, oh, it's a small to mid-sized project, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. It's fair. I accept that. But a project that size, that we need continuity. And so we still continue to recruit people who are interested, knowing that they might not be prepared to sign up today, but may, step forward in the future to fill a seat.
Thanks for your volunteer service.
Thank you.
Any
Thank
other
you for yours.
questions for these gentlemen? Well, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Right.
It was an education, and I feel much better informed about these 2 articles. Hope everybody else does.
Yep.
Okay.
Once again, you know where to find us, and, if you
Yeah.
want us to come back at any point to talk about things, feel free,
Thank you.
We're happy. It's important as we move forward, and this was the key to, I think, the success of getting the trust off the ground, was a lot of civic engagement. We really beat the drums through a variety of different avenues, different media, to make people comfortable in what we wanted to do and some of the benefits. So, and we got to continue to do that all the time.
Yeah, agree. Got to communicate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
A lot accomplished in a little time.
Very
That's
much.
pretty impressive.
Yeah. So we have no other guests invited for this evening, but just to give you a heads up, I sent out an amended calendar. I'm sure you received it. The community development folks are now scheduled for February 28th, as is the citizen petitioner for the Indigenous People Day. So we're moving that particular subject matter from the 24th to the 28th, and that gives us a little more room on February 24th to hear from the CPA folks and the planning and zoning folks. So just to give you a heads up on that. Are there any liaison reports?
I'm just wondering, do we have the schools still on the 17th?
Oh, yes, we do have the schools.
That's
Next
confirmed.
Thursday, it is confirmed.
Okay.
The school department will be here, so that's the 17th. Okay?
Yep.
I had a conversation, and I'll do it under the heading of liaison reports. I had a conversation again with Christy Williams about replenishing the AFC Reserve Fund. We have spent $85,000 to date, and we have approximately, round numbers, about $160,000 left. We have no idea what the next couple of months is going to bring us in terms of ice and snow needs. And she has recommended, and I tend to concur with this, that we put an article in to replenish that fund. Now, it's basically going to be an article that comes, if we do this and the article is approved, the money will come from free cash. At the end of the year, whatever funds are left will go back to free cash. So rather than get caught short if we have some unforeseen weather events that really chew up a lot of our snow and ice funds, separate account, but and they might need some from us. We need to make sure that we have sufficient funds available. Plus, between now and the end of June, we have no idea what emergency contingencies we might have to deal with. So I strongly recommend that we increase or replenish our reserve fund through the upcoming town meeting. Is there any discussion about that? Yes, Walter.
So I spoke against this last time, but I've reconsidered my opinion. I was thinking it was more of a raise and appropriate into which would become free cash, and I wasn't interested. But the fact it's coming from free cash and returning to free cash means to me that it's a fine idea, because then if we did have to spend it, it would immediately go on the tax levy the other way if we were short on funds. And this way we'll be able to spend some of that free cash on ice and snow. Also we do get to review, we get to decide on any other things that people might see that money and want to spend it on. It's still up to us to decide that. So I've changed my opinion on this since the last time we talked about it.
Okay. Andrew?
Clarify, Walter, are you saying if we take it out of free cash and then use it on ice and snow, it will, it'll just be out of free cash? But if ice and snow, because there is already a mechanism for ice and snow, but that will come out of raise and appropriate?
I understand that if let's say ice and snow is $200,000, we only have 120. The other amount automatically goes on the
Tax levy next
levy
year.
for next year.
Ice and snow is, I think, the only account that can deficit spend.
Right, but it can't be, well, I mean, it could still be, free cash could still be transferred.
It has to come.
Because it can be to pay the budget,
Well-
and even though we don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, well,
I suppose
but
that's possible.
but
I don't know.
if we could preempt all of those machinations, coming up and having to deal with them on an emergency basis, it would be a lot easier. And the other issue is it's not only we as a committee that have to approve any use of AFC reserve requests, but the town manager has to pass on it as well. So I think there's sufficient oversight. If, let's say, in May or June, somebody comes to us with a request for using our funds, and we look at it and, we're a little skeptical about it, we also have the town manager who will have that same thought. So, Andrew, you had your hand up.
I did. So my first thought is the conversation about the ice and snow is a red herring because of the permissions to deficit spend there. So the question is, what is this money we may be needing for? And I would suggest that when it came down to budgeting time and we had to put out a budget for our department, we looked at the history, we looked at what we've spent before, we looked at the fact that there have been many winters we've had to worry about things, and with all that in place, and we thought $250,000 was enough of a budget. And what we're saying right now is essentially that we probably mulliganed at that point, and we should just pad our budget to make up for that deficit. My own instinct is that I'm reluctant to put more money into our account that other people may be able to draw on for less than absolute urgent needs. So my preference is to stay closer to our original budget because that's what we thought we need when we were doing our budgeting.
Well, that's true, and I understand the rationale there, but the principle behind this reserve fund for the AFC is for emergencies and other unforeseen contingencies. And, I have no idea what that might be between now and June. Who knew that we were going to have to deal with the boilers, at the golf course?
May I recommend then that we
Yes.
transfer $500,000 in because we have no idea what we're going to see in these unforeseen circumstances and all this uncertainty. And that statement is intentionally absurd because it gets us back to that point where it's unforeseen and unknown. And we thought we knew what it was, and we've managed under $250,000 for years now. So that's my piece, but I thank you.
Okay.
Have we
Well,
not?
go ahead,
Maybe if you guys remember or not, but I thought there was some years where we actually ended up voting at the fall town meeting or a special town meeting, more money for ice and, well, actually it can't be, can it?
No, it's
It
into
must-
the next
It
year.
must have been, I don't know. I thought there was some meeting where we once
Well, okay,
voted more
look,
ice and snow.
Any other
We've
comments?
had emergencies that we've had a special town meeting in order to solve. It
Yeah.
doesn't all need to be solved by us. If we get hit by a tornado or something,
Yeah.
we'll have an emergency town meeting, a special town meeting.
Okay, so let's put it to a vote. And I would move that we replenish the AFC reserve fund and bring it back up to the level of $250,000. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Walter, second. Can we vote, please?
Hold on, I gotta catch up here.
Beth? You're muted, Beth.
I'm just wondering if we vote on,
Are we
Something
voting
that's
to do this right this
on
instant
the
or to
agenda.
request a warrant article to do?
Request a warrant article.
Okay, can we?
Yeah, I
word
should have
that
been
way?
more clear. So I guess, let me amend my motion to that the AFC request a warrant article to bring its reserves back up to the original point of $250,000.
Blumberg, second,
Beth seconds,
whatever.
okay? Any more discussion? Okay, let's go to a vote. Beth?
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, no?
Olin, yes.
Eagle, no.
Leslie, yes.
Beretti, yes. So it,
1, 2, 3, 4 yeses, 2 noes.
okay, the motion passes.
And, 3
I will
people not here.
request that, that article be drafted.
Can I I just,
Who wants to write the note in the thing that says we're disagreeing about funding our own
I
group?
think that we should re-vote this when we have a full quorum.
Well, we'll
Close
revote the
down.
article.
We'll revote the article.
Yeah.
This
when we
was
actually
just
vote the
the-
article,
whether we
should
put,
Yeah.
you could still vote no against the article if you want later, or yes, or whatever you want to do.
Okay,
But I'm just gonna point out that, you know, when we had the discussion this year, I was in favor of one of the reasons I voted yes was I was in favor of setting our limit higher, and people said, wait, do it later. So.
Okay.
yeah.
well, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. First of all, we have to vote all the articles. We're scheduled to do that a couple of weeks from now. And
So what you were saying, Beth, is that you thought it should have started higher, but people said wait and see how much we spend. So if we spend more, we
Right.
can add more at town meeting.
right,
Right, I would have preferred that we had just slightly adjusted it higher. I respect Paul's comment way back when, if we set it higher, we'll spend it higher, but I just thought we were getting on the edge of things we needed. I mean, because I think way back when, Paul had commented, and I apologize if I'm misquoting you, that if we set a value, we'll spend it.
yeah, well, hopefully we won't.
It's a good point that Beth makes too, though, that there are 3 members missing, so it'll be good when we re-vote.
Okay,
If more support, I think.
well, we will. We're going to have a chance to pass on it again when we vote the articles. Okay, any future draft agendas? If the calendar changes, I will let you know. We're waiting to hear from the Council on Aging about the article that is in there about a study of the senior, study regarding the senior citizens' needs in Westboro. If they ask to come, they will be added. I do know that there is another potential citizens petition that is being developed. And if that goes to an article, we'll have to fill that one in as well. But right now, the calendar looks pretty good. The warrant has to be at the printers on Monday, March 14th at the latest, and I expect we'll be able to do that. In preparation for our message, I would ask that all of you start thinking about what's going to be included in that message. I think it's going to be, for the last 2 years, as I said last night, when we met in the retreat with the school committee, we have been waving the flag that there was a lot that's going to be coming at the town meeting over the next few years. And looking at the articles we have right now, there are quite a few, and many of them are financially oriented, obviously. And so I think we need to be clear about what our message is going to be for this year going forward. So if you would give some thought to what you'd like to see included, I'll be happy to do the first draft, as we always do, and then circulate it for your comments, et cetera. Any other questions, Paul?
I'm wondering, since the citizens petition, I think, is coming after the warrant, is being presented to us after the warrant closes, I don't think we have a role here, but do you think we should have any role or any recommendation about the placement in the warrant for that? I thought a good argument was made to move it up, and I think actually all citizens petitions should be moved up, not at the end. But I don't know that that's our role. I'm just raising it because we won't have a chance.
I believe, and this is just my belief, it's what I understand is the selectmen control the warrant. I
but
mean,
we
we
could
can
advise
certainly
if
make
we-
a recommendation,
Right.
but The fact that the warrant is closing on the 22nd, there is that petition on the Indigenous Peoples' Day is already on the warrant. The other article that may be coming, the other petition article that may be coming, has to get in before the warrant closes. So,
I'm talking about it being at the end of the night as opposed to a position more convenient for a larger amount of citizens.
well, yeah, I think the selectmen have been made aware of that desire, and I guess they did not act on the request of the petitioner for the Indigenous Peoples' Day, or not act favorably, and they left it where it was.
That's the fact. I'm just wondering if we
Yeah.
have a recommendation.
We certainly can, and I'd be happy to discuss it when we have a full complement for a meeting.
I
Okay.
thought,
Go ahead, Beth.
I thought that the final warrant revision, which is still up to the selectmen, sometimes there was like wholesale chunk, now that we know what all the warrant articles, let's group like things together and things like that. So, I think we should make any recommendations that we feel are appropriate, but I don't think that things are necessarily frozen in place yet.
Well, I heard part of this because I was at the select board meeting, but I had to leave before they decided. But she does place the articles for a certain purpose and reason, and that's the way they are now. And traditionally, the citizen ones come at the end. It isn't a requirement or in the bylaw or anything.
Okay.
But that's why the zoning things are at the end and the capitals in the front. And, she has a method, a process.
All right. Okay,
Yeah, the biggest argument was precedence or something, and I see it as, I wouldn't move it up just for this one this one petition, but it made me think about why aren't they in a better spot, so to speak?
Okay.
Because they're coming, nothing is more democratic than a citizen's petition, and it's maybe could be perceived as getting short shrift, so.
Hey, John, can
It'd
you
be very early on the second night.
bite your tongue? John, can you shed a little light on this for us, please?
Well, historically, it has been the citizens' petitions have been placed last. Again, it's not just Christie's method. The method, I did not see the selectmen's meeting, but what I just heard as a synopsis, that essentially it's clean up for the annual town meeting. It's typically clean up and then the budget and then capital items and then it moves toward spending, and then it has zoning articles, and then it's usually citizen petitions. So that is certainly a long time tradition. It is the selectmen's purview to do what they want, and I would have to look up I don't have my book ready at hand right now. There is a motion that can be made to take an article out of order if it's not where people want it, but then that does take time of the meeting to be debated, and it takes a pretty hefty, essentially a quantum of vote to move it. And I think the theory is that it's not that citizens' petitions are given short shrift. It's that the legislature is the legislature, and every article that comes before the legislature should be given, equal interest in the voters. And if voters choose to come and go for particular ones, that's their choice. But the position in the warrant is not supposed to have it's not supposed to connote any sort of preference. It's just that everybody who chooses to attend town meeting should take each article seriously.
Okay.
And position shouldn't really enter into it. Of course, there are practical concerns, but that's not the way it's worked, so.
You can be sure there will be a motion, from what I could gather from, so we will have to deal with it at the town meeting.
Right. Yep.
Okay, anything else? Walter?
Does anybody know much about the placeholder articles? My understanding is they've been discussing for quite a long time as to whether to put this, town planner into the planning department or not, and it was going back and forth to the planning board. But my only point being that if they throw that in at the very end, we're going to need to hear about that from, I guess, the planning board or Christie
Yeah, Christie.
and things, because that could, That's a pretty interesting one, but it's still not in the bullpen.
It's not in the bullpen. And until we know otherwise, we work with what we have. Okay, if there's nothing else, I
Andrew has a,
would like a motion, I'm sorry.
Andrew has a.
Oh, Andrew, I didn't see that. I apologize. Go ahead.
No problem. And I'm not sure if this is a question for you, Mike, or for John, but do we know if we're going with the electronic voting this time around, or are we going to be still back at the paper ballots?
I believe we are going to be back at the paper ballots because it takes a certain amount of time to coordinate the electronic voting, and I'm pretty certain that the Board of Health isn't going to have made a recommendation in terms of whether we can expect to fit people in the auditorium in time. So I'm assuming we may be doing paper voting slips.
Okay.
But I will confer with the town clerk and figure out, but that's my guess, just because I've asked the Board of Health to consider and tell me and the town what their recommendations are, and they're taking that up at their next meeting, which I think is next week or so. But it does take time to coordinate for the electronic voting company. I'm not sure there's enough time, but I will check.
And it costs money.
And it costs
And
money.
it costs money.
Thank you, John.
All that paper.
Okay, anybody else? All right, I would like a motion to adjourn. And don't forget, before we do this, we have no meeting on Monday for all you Valentines. So our next meeting will be next Thursday with the school department.
Hooray.
Okay? Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to adjourn.
And we have a heart up on the screen.
That's great, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you. Motion to adjourn second?
I'll second it.
Bradley, second.
Okay. Beth?
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Beretti, yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, Westboro TV. Aiden, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, all.
Good night, all.
Good
See you
night,
next
everybody.
week.